I suppose my speciality is really helping people from 30 up to mid-50s to really finding meaning and purpose in the work that they do.
Great work.
And it's usually to step away from institutions or organizations that they've worked in for a long time and given a lot of loyal service. It's not that there's anything bad about where they've been. They've just outgrown it and are looking to now transition and move in a different area that excites them more, that fits more with their life. And I have been in business now I'm in my 3rd year of business. And when I left the bank in 2017, I didn't have a clue what I was going to do next. And when I kind of look back over my 20-year career there, there'd been so many twists and I suppose bumps along the way as well. I had been involved in lots of change projects. I'd probably seen the biggest change project that had ever happened in financial services when Royal Bank bought Ulster Bank. And I was involved in massive change around that back in 2006, 2007. But anybody that works in financial services will know how change has just become part of the infrastructure. There's, because we're in such a fast-paced world now that, we're in a very different era of how people use money, how people bank. And banks have had to be very quick, sometimes not as quick as the market wanted, with change to meet those needs, to meet those customer needs. Certainly around the digital piece as well. But when I left the bank, I took time out, as you said, because I really didn't know what I was going to do next. And I suppose I get asked quite a lot about having a gap or having a break on your CV. And I think if you can explain a gap and articulate what it gave you, and if you're thinking of having a little bit of a gap, it's thinking about at what cost if you don't take the gap. Because when I left the bank, I had worked there for nearly 20 years and I had never had a summer off since I had done my junior cert or inter-cert, as some of your viewers might be more familiar with.
Indeed.
So having that time out was so invaluable to me because it kind of really helped me understand who I was without the title and the job roles that I'd had, and helped me kind of understand what were my strengths and where I'd added the biggest value in my time there. And it was always people. There was always people at the center of it. I loved when I was, when I had people responsibilities and I managed, medium-sized teams, kind of anywhere between 20 and 30 people. And I loved helping them, nurture talent, help, exposing people to new opportunities to help them grow, and really stretching them as well. And that was always a real passion of mine. So it's probably no surprise that I went back and retrained as a life and executive coach. And I help people now who are in situations like me, who are looking to carve out a new path. Because we think career is linear, right? But actually it's squiggly, and we can have pivots, real meaningful pivots. And I think when we have meaning and purpose in the work that we do, we can actually really change the world.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a very in-depth answer. And we're going to talk more about some of the topics that you raised in your Tell Me All About Jennifer Maher response. But just stripping it back a bit, where did Jennifer grow up? What sporting interests do you have? And where did you go to school and university?
Well, so I grew up in the suburbs in Tala in Dublin, which surprises people now because I don't have a real Dublin accent. I've been living in Wicklow now for it'll be 15 years now this month. And I'm laughing at your question around sporting interests. I absolutely have no interest in sport at all. I love hiking now. That's been, and walking, but that's kind of been a passion that's grown in the last kind of decade. And where did I go to school? So I went to school for primary education, I was in a mixed school, a local mixed school. And then for my secondary education, I went to one of the largest girls' schools in Ireland, St. Paul's in Greenhill. So there always seems to be a St. Paul's girl, even no matter where I go on holidays, I bump into somebody who went to St. Paul's. And then my college education is a little bit, it's a bit quirky. So I started a degree in business management, but I really wanted the few bob, John. So, and I was very lucky actually that my parents were so open to me when I wanted to drop out. And I was like, I just want to work. I don't want to be wasting all this time. I couldn't really cope with it. I had to have the discipline around going to lectures and all myself. All I could see when I was 18, I just wanted to have a car. And I didn't care how I was going to fund this. I was going to get this car going, but I knew I wanted to be driving. So my route to getting the car and to be mobile was to get a job. And I remember applying for 2 banks and the civil service. And I said, whoever offers me, like, it was so self-assured, even like, looking back, because I said, whoever offers me the job first, I'll take it. And yeah, I started at 18 and a half in the bank and never looked back, never regretted that decision. And I had great opportunities of learning as I went through the bank as well. And, did lots of courses, lots of things that have, even to this day, really stand to me. And then I went back and did my diploma then when I left the bank. So
you wanted your independence from a very early age. And I think that's a very noble cause, to be quite honest. Describe the emotions you felt when you walked out on that stage at TEDx Tralee in 2021.
Oh, I will actually get emotional even thinking about that.
A fair play to you.
I suppose the emotions were real pride in myself. The feedback has been phenomenal. But the thing that really stands out in the feedback is around my composure and my confidence on this and the presence on the stage, because that is something that I have had to really learn and practice. I grew up in my, when I was in school, every single school report always said I had no confidence. I wouldn't even in my latter years in the bank, when I'd had to give presentations, I would stand up, I'd have a red face, my hands would be shaking. I didn't have that inner confidence and that inner kind of self-mastery for a lot of my life. So when I got on that stage in TEDx and shared a really vulnerable story, I think it was just real presence and pride in myself.
And people appreciate you much more as a person for making yourself vulnerable to their, to an audience. It takes great confidence to do that. And it's something I've done myself in the past, not TEDx, but I've done professional speaking and public speaking for a number of years. And really, when I got into professional speaking, I learned the value of storytelling to connect emotionally with people. And it's through creating that visceral feeling that you create an emotional connection with people. So well done to you, Jennifer, for having the confidence and the gumption to take a step out of your comfort zone, embrace a constructive challenge, and to put your name forward for a TEDx. And getting accepted and then getting up on that stage really is a big thing. And you probably surpassed your own expectations of yourself and many other people's expectations of you. So well done to you.
Oh, thank you, John. That's lovely to hear. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You mentioned there in your introductory talk about people who have got gaps on their CVs. What advice would you give to one of your clients who has a gap on their CV and they're applying for a job or considering starting their own business?
I think if we can articulate why the gap is there. So sometimes it's to literally have downtime, to kind of decompress. Like certainly my own experience after leaving an organization, having, given much loyal service to, it was almost like I needed to decompress. I needed to just completely shake off and understand what was mine and what was actually the bank's and what I needed to let go of. My advice for anybody who has got a gap is to own it.
Very good advice.
Own the gap and understand what it gave you and how you grew in that gap. And I think if you can articulate that and know that it served you and served a purpose for your life, I think that is, nobody can disagree with that because it's yours.
Yeah, there's often very many reasons for having a gap on a CV, such as a person, taking a career break, I should say, in the case of women, because they want to start a family, for example.
Yeah,
that's a very good reason for having a gap on a CV. Or in the case of any person, male or female, they took a career break to go back to college, for example. Often happens, or they were made redundant and it took them a while to find another job. But in that interim period, they upskilled themselves. They're very reasonable, excuses for having a gap on a CV. Yeah. What message would you have for the staff in KBC Bank and Ulster Bank who may be made redundant in the near future?
I think everybody responds so differently to redundancy. I was put at risk 3 times before I took the leap myself. And I think we go through a huge range of emotions. It can be a little bit like grief, and we can be in denial, we can be angry. And I think the quicker you can accept that it's actually not about you and take back your power and think, okay, well, what can I do? What can I do? What action can I take? I know there's a lot of people at the moment who are sitting in both of those organizations who are kind of in a waiting room. They're waiting on dates. They're waiting on what's going to happen next. They're waiting on clarity. And they don't really have that clarity. So it leads to that uncertainty. And they're kind of like, well, I'll just wait and see what happens. And then I'll let the path reveal itself. I think we can forget that we always can take the steering wheel. We can always do something to take our power back in that situation. And our power might need to be focused on our network. So it might be thinking about how we can grow our network. Who do we know? Certainly in the last decade, attrition has been very high in those organizations anyway. So quite often people have a lot of contacts dotted around in other financial services or other organizations. But what I would say is it will be okay. You will figure it out. You're naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. You will figure out, and you will be okay ultimately, and you will be fine on the other side of that safety, that comfy blanket that you're holding on to under that organization.
You make a number of great points there, Jennifer, because going back to an interview I did some weeks ago with Dr. Linda Shaw on the GYFT Show, she talked about the fact that redundancy is not personal, it's a business decision. And you also mentioned there about the fact that people can feel anger, demotivated, they feel lost. And that's a natural reaction to redundancy. And what I say to people is, don't sit at home and moan about life. You have to take proactive steps after a couple of months and go out there, get yourself a life coach and take proactive steps to rebuild your life, because there's always a better future out there. You just have to find it. What values and beliefs did you unpack as you transitioned from working in the financial services sector to self-employment?
Yeah, and I'm really very clear on my values, and I suppose my top two values are love and peace. Okay, so they're always the ones that help anchor me. I'm really also on that list is trust and learning as well, because I realized actually that the reason why I felt like I had this kind of stagnated energy around my work for a long time, or periods in the bank, was because I wasn't actually learning, I wasn't stretching, and I wasn't growing, which ultimately is what us humans are here to do, is to keep growing and evolving, learn some more, grow, evolve, learn some more. And I had to realize what values were, like, they're mine, okay, but there was another set of values that I had kind of inherently taken on that used to be plastered all over the walls in the bank that weren't mine. And I had to very firmly give them back, and realize actually they're not really important to me. And I guess that's the reason why I knew it was my time to step away as well, because there was a misalignment of values. I think subconsciously I knew that and felt that. And I guess the beliefs that I needed to unpack and let go of was that our careers are not finite. You know, we go into organizations and we think we're going to become lifers. And I don't think there's any such thing now in the world of work that we're in. And, you know, the beliefs that we hold are always what's standing in our way. And they can limit us or they can empower us. I know, like, when I left the bank, I got so many good well wishes, and they were so well intended, but I remember people referring to it as me retiring. And I was like, this is not the end. This is far from the end. Yeah. I'm only getting started now. But this is not the end. And I think, and there was definitely a feel, even so, you know, at some level, that, you know, I kind of knew all I was going to know. I kind of thought I was fully baked leaving the bank, that I knew lots, but actually, because I wasn't learning and growing and stretching, when I came to that realization and let go of that limiting belief, you know, I realized that I could actually be, you know, the CEO of my own life, and that there was another way, and I wasn't fully baked. I hadn't even gone in the oven, put it that way.
May I ask you a question there, Jennifer? Did you realize, you know, when you started your own business, that trust is an important factor in business? Because another person recently said that you don't have to know and like a person to do business with them. You have to trust them. Is that something you learned yourself through self-employment?
Yeah, for sure. And I mentioned trust as being a top value of mine as well. And I think anything that we want to see and feel, we have to do the work on ourselves, right? So there was a lot, certainly for me, setting up in business even, I had to really trust myself that, you know, the reasons why I was going to do it, and who I was going to help. And I think if people do like you as a consequence of trusting you, then that's great. But building trust very quickly is something that I'm very well known for. And I mean, in coaching, it's obviously a very sacred space. We have to lock in confidentiality. There's very much a safe container for sharing in the space that I hold for people when they're at a career junction. But I think the trust is a non-negotiable for me. And if trust is lost, if trust is compromised in any situation, then, that is not a place that I want to be. So.
You mentioned there, Jennifer, that you like to build trust pretty quickly with people. Would you have been guilty in the past of being too trusting?
It's a great question. Yeah, and I think that's where our values can work for and against us. I like to think I'm very fair as well. And certainly there have been times where I have been too trusting in certainly when I was working in the bank. But I think when you're very clear on where, we can all know what our values are, but if we don't have a boundary around them, then they might as well just be written words on the wall. But I love the saying, I heard Brene Brown say it a few years ago, clear is kind. And I think I'm very clear. Certainly that's how I show up with my clients and who I help. Very, very clear. This is what has to happen. This is these are where my business boundaries are. And I think people really appreciate that. And they feel that it's kind, because when they know, then there's no uncertainty. There's no gray or filling in the blanks. They've got that assurance, and they feel safe. They feel psychologically safe. And that's what I think builds the trust. I've a genuine interest in human behavior, and I really do care. And I think that's what anybody that's ever worked with me would always say about me, that I really do care. And I think people never forget how you made them feel.
That's very, very true, because it's often said that if you upset a person, they never forget you. But often if you make them happy, they can forget, but over time they do, but not in a nasty way or unforgiving way. But if you make people feel unhappy or you upset them, it's often the case they never forget it. It's always in the back of their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Why should we say I'll do instead of saying I'll try?
Oh, you've been looking at my posts. Yeah, I think I'm guilty as much as the next person of saying, I'll try that. But actually, because our bodies are always listening, like we forget that we're emotional beings. And that's why I last year, even in one of the lockdowns, I did a qualification around emotional intelligence, so I could understand the feelings behind behavior. And I'll try is so vague, because it's kind of half effort, and the intention is half effort, because you're leaving room for not doing. Whereas if you say I will do, so when people formulate actions in a coaching session with me, I'm very, I'll push them for by when are you going to do that? Because if we don't have a date, then it won't become real. Otherwise, they say, a goal without a date is just a dream. So by when? And even if you only do 10% of it, you're more likely to continue to do it and build the momentum. But if you just kind of say, oh, I'll try that, I push people for a stronger commitment than that, because I think I will do is just far more stronger.
I know what you're saying there. And when I was in the workplace myself as an accountant for many years, one of my great answers was, if I was asked to do something, oh, I'll do that when I'm ready, or I'll think about that. And they were kind of very non-committal answers. And the person was probably looking for help or advice there and then. And when I left their office, they probably rolled their eyes up. What's this guy thinking of? I want help now, not tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
And I think as well, I heard another great, I love the one-liners, but life rewards action. So it's that action that we take. And when we take the action, then because we get that hormonal dopamine hit of completing a task, we're more likely then to do it and continue to do more action. When we're not in action, that's when the energy stagnates and we're not moving in some shape. We're never going back in time or anything. We're constantly moving forward. So and it's not about constantly being on and do. It's pacing yourself. I'm also very much about gentle pacing as much as I am about taking action. It has to feel right for you and against the backdrop of all the other commitments and priorities you have. So yeah.
That brings me to my next question there, Jennifer, which is, why should we choose consistency over intensity?
Yeah, I think we're in a world of where we should be constantly on, right? Mm-hmm. Where we everything is on, and certainly women are very guilty of not being able to do nothing or even doing less. We think that we have to go at this unreasonable pace. And what happens is we get burnt out or we get sick. And I think if we're more focused on consistency, a little bit, incremental wins, tiny wins, all add up to bigger things. Whereas if we go gung-ho into doing something, I know I said I'm not into sport, but just even take the example, if you want to go and run a marathon and you've never even ran 1K, and you start a training schedule that's totally out there, you're going to burn out really fast. And you're not going what could happen is you could get injured, you could get sick, and then you'll do nothing. And if you miss, if you miss more than twice, you're more likely to not continue. So even if you did 500 meters starting off and build up over time, that consistency and that habitual way of doing it, small wins over time, they all add up. And that's what I mean around that consistency over intensity.
That's a great answer. And as a good friend of mine says, David Heiner, he talks about setting massive goals. But he also says, take incremental steps. And all those achievements over time, no matter how small, will add up to achieving a massive goal over time.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's having a big vision, right? And it's thinking big. And it's getting really clear on that. And even if that's a million miles away, have the great vision, 100%. Dream really, really big, but don't try and get there in one leap, because what will happen is you'll just fall flat.
That's very, very pertinent advice. So thank you for that answer. How do you think the future of work is going to impact the banking sector?
I think we're seeing, you and I were even just having a very quick chat before we came online about how so many processes we see in our world have been dehumanized. Technology has taken over. I think that's certainly the case in the banking sector, where digital has replaced people at counters in branches. And, it goes a lot deeper than that. We've also seen a lot of, and not just in banking, but in lots of organizations around the right shoring of work as well. That certainly I would have been involved in a lot of right shoring work towards the end of my career in the bank. I think it's being open to, I think certainly the last 2 years, there's nothing really certain, right? There's nothing uncertainty is what we're now becoming used to. And I think if we can accept that, that's where the opportunities are created. But I think even in what I'm hearing from my clients at the moment is, there's a real need for change in organizations and in cultures around creating that psychology, that's like that safety for people. People want to be seen and heard, and certainly even around flexibility of work. But I think that's really exciting as well, because we have this whole talent pool, even if you just think of women who have walked away to focus on their families, and them returning to the workplace. And, if organizations are having to be agile and be open to different ways of working, different patterns, then I think that's actually very exciting. It's a very exciting time, because it means then we're going to get more diversity, we're going to get more inclusivity. And I think as well, we'll start thinking about, even if we think about the Great Resignation, people see that as a really bad thing. And yes, for organizations, if they might have high attrition, like I was talking to somebody the other day, they said like their where they work has like 25% attrition, meaning like 1 in every 4 people won't be here in a year, which that's quite stark. But at the same time, like that creates these shifts in how organizations are putting people. They're going to be forced to put people at the heart of what they do, not just say they're going to do it, but actually really do it.
Indeed, that's a great answer. And I think what you're saying there is the Great Resignation is going to force companies that have high levels of staff turnover to focus their attention on how can we improve staff retention? What genuine changes can we take or put in place to improve that staff retention? If you have 1 in 4 employees leaving every couple of years, over time, you're going to have a tremendously high staff turnover that impairs or impacts productivity in any organization. And it also causes other employees within the organization to consider their place and maybe to move on. So it's self-defeating, I suppose, to have high turnover of staff in any organization.
Yeah.
What aha moment did you have when you transitioned from working in financial services towards starting your own business?
Yeah, and I just wrote an article actually on all the some of the aha moments I had on the other side of redundancy. I guess the biggest one was around time and around my time, and being, I get to decide how I spend my time. I was definitely guilty when I left the bank, and even though I was at home and spending time with the kids, I was still trying to nearly recreate a corporate schedule in this house, and trying to be busy and working I'll have this done by this time, and but I think it's really around time and being flexible. And my business operates around my lifestyle. And I think that's definitely a model that people want now post-pandemic. They want work to, we used to say work-life balance, but really it's harmony. I think, the balance is a fine art, but harmony is a nicer way of looking at it. That, because we don't want to be in our work all the time. We don't want to be, might not want to be over here all the time. So it's just, where did the two meet? And I think that's the biggest aha moment for me, is that I get to create that. And I now help other people to realize they can create that for themselves as well.
Three remarkable things I can take away from today's interview with Jennifer are: firstly, it's important to establish trust with people in business. And it's also important to have boundaries around your values in business. Secondly, there's increased digitalization in the banking sector. And thirdly, in terms of the future of work and the great resignation, perhaps there'd be greater inclusivity I'll start again. There'd be more inclusive workplaces going forward, more harmony in the workplace, and more involvement for both male and female people in the workplace in terms of decision making. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience today before I let you go, Jennifer?
No, I think I've loved this conversation, John. Thank you so much for the opportunity. If there is anybody sitting out there who is excited about their future, who's not scared of that, they've worked through the initial redundancy piece, and are now dabbling with what if and what could be next. I'd love to be able to help you, in exploring that. I have a very successful 3-month coaching package that is getting phenomenal results from the people that are signing up to it. So please do reach out if that's something that sounds like that could help you where you're at right now. What could be in 3 months' time? It's dare to have that dream and know that you're worth it.
And on that note, I'll end today's show. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, John.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you.